Hello and welcome to Short Tales. For today's episode, I'm very pleased to be joined by my friend and the producer and company director of Pirate Size Productions, Bryony McLachlan. Welcome, Bri.
Thank you, Damo. Pleasure to be here.
Look, thanks so much for joining today. I always love chatting with you. I always love our catch-ups anyway. And what would improve them other than sticking two big mics between the two of us?
I know, right?
So, like as I said, you work as the director and producer of Pirate Size, which pretty much brings us straight to our topic. So, Bri, what are we discussing today?
Today, we are talking about the role of producer in story.
Yes.
And getting projects made, I suppose.
Yeah, which I think is a great one. You know, when we're talking about what subject we want to talk about, I was kind of presented this one because I think a lot of people know of producers. They've heard the term producers. They see it in credits and all that sort of stuff. Probably don't really have any kind of clue what they do.
Absolutely. The most common question I get is, what does a producer do? Or what do you do? And while I get that question so often and think about it a lot, I'm still not great at answering it.
Giving an
answer. It is just so varied and complex, and my answer is often a rambling half-hour answer.
Well, good, because we could feel
so that might be the podcast.
Yeah, perfect. But no, look, hopefully we'll pin down what that is. But before we kind of get into all that, I wanted to actually just talk a bit about you.
Great.
So yeah, we've been mates for a while, but like I kind of don't really know your history with story. Like, what sort of early days, what was it that sort of really made you interested in TV or film or just story in general?
Yeah, it goes back right to my childhood.
Yeah.
I was always into story and film and making little videos with my friends, with my dad's clunky old recorder. And thinking back, I think I was often producing the group even back then.
Interesting, yeah.
Without knowing it at the time, obviously, but it was always organizing everyone and making the project happen. So I always had this love of story and film. I didn't necessarily think, or you didn't think at all, that it could be a career at that point. It was just a real interest, and my dad loved movies and we'd watch all the classics. And then I went through school, went to uni, didn't know what I wanted to do. I did a commerce degree at Melbourne Uni, just sort of thinking this will be a generally
useful,
kind of
I did the same, but
degree.
Like a general science degree, which was a bad idea because science is not a good industry to go into.
Commerce is great. I always had this idea I wanted to run my own business.
Yeah,
I didn't know what in, so I did commerce degree, major in business, and it was, I think, the last semester of my degree when I was really starting to panic about what I was going to do.
It's terrifying
with my life. Such big decisions at that age, and I had this kind of almost cliche light bulb moment where I don't know exactly how this came about. I can't quite remember, but I remember just making that connection of combining my love of story with my sort of business skills and my sort of desire to have a business, and thinking, hang on, this sort of producing role that I've heard about, but maybe don't quite know what it is.
The whole malarkey that's being written.
It feels like it could be the perfect mix of both my interests and skills. And so sort of from there I went to VCA. I did a postgrad degree there in the producing course. Yeah. And that was great, and left there and went into Werner Film Productions, a Melbourne production company. Worked closely with Joanna Werner there, who was terrific to work with, a great mentor, and was there for around 5 years.
Yeah, and brilliant.
The story goes on.
We'll get into that at the other end of it later. But my first question is those short films you made. Do you think they still exist somewhere?
They most definitely do.
Oh, fantastic!
Yes, on I think I have some here at home. My parents live in Tasmania, and I'm sure there's a hard drive somewhere with some.
I love that.
I'm sure somewhat excruciating, but I'm sure also quite cute. There are some where we're quite young. And quite cute little videos. a whole range of things, from stories we wrote, sort of, there was a horror story in there somewhere.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
My friend and I went through a stage of doing little spoofs of advertisements, like Maybelline type scripts. We did a lot of news sort of skit things. There was news. I remember a lot of weather reports.
Kids love weather reports. Right? They're crazy for them.
Oh, God. Yeah, so a range.
That's great.
Range of...
It's so funny, like so many people in film and TV, that is, so many of them like, when I was a kid we would film this stuff.
Yeah.
I never did. My parents never really had like a good camera, so that definitely played a part. But I don't think I even really thought about it once the tech sort of came in a bit more. I always loved TV. I was always like obsessed with just watching too much of it, but never had really thought about doing it. Until obviously much later in my life when I'm like, oh, mate, okay, I really like this thing.
I was talking about this with one of the friends I used to do it with, and I think a big part of that was I grew up in the country, and weekends you're kind of stuck. You know, you can't just walk down the road and down into town. So often friends would come around, or I go around to my friend's place, and you need something to do. You need a project for the weekend or the day. And so we always just got really creative, and I think a part of that was creating these little shows. And,
brilliant.
We all had fairly arty parents. It was quite a creative community, and
that definitely helps.
That was really encouraged, and we had patient parents who would sit down and watch us do all our plays and shows.
I kind of got that from my dad. Like even just like I sort of, my creative journey started more with drawing. I drew a lot of stuff, and and that eventually led to me doing like my own webcomic for a while, which Dad did. He used to draw like Charlie Brown Peanuts characters, and I remember him showing me his book. So literally I just started drawing Charlie Brown Peanuts characters, and then sort of branched out from there to drawing like other like Garfield and other sort of comic strips, and then from there to like I would draw Marvel characters and that sort of stuff. Never traced. That was very important to me. I remember that being a big deal. But would draw them a bunch. Where my mum is a big reader, but not necessarily super creative herself. Happy to imbue other people's creativity. But same sort of thing. Yeah, I guess there was enough of it there for me to go, oh, okay, well, I'll try my hand. Like that seems like a fun thing to do. Rather than just, you know, I don't know how else other kids killed the time. That was the way I did it.
I don't know. Yeah. That's interesting.
And was there any, like, do you remember any big influences early on that, like, sort of got you thinking, well, I want to do what they're doing? Was there anything that jumps out at you?
That's a good question. I grew up with my dad who loved all the classics, you know, old movies, as I would call them.
Do you remember, like, did you like those old movies the first time? Like, I'm sure he made sound strong. I'm sure he encouraged you to watch them. Okay, he did. Okay, good.
It was like, this is what we're watching
Let's call
tonight.
it what it is,
some old black and white movie.
Yeah.
I think there was resistance at first. It's like, watching a black and white movie, how boring.
Yeah.
As soon as I sat down in front of any of these movies, because they were all, you know, the classics and the good ones, I would always get drawn in. And despite, you know,
the reluctance.
I always was really captivated. And then as well as all those old classics, you know, watch all the new movies and shows coming out, and loved going to the movies with my friends. And so it felt like quite a broad education in terms of what was around at the time. Yeah. And I don't think there was a specific, you know, film or director or anything that really hooked me in. I think I just really enjoyed consuming it and was really curious about the world and how these were made, and especially having dabbled in that in a very small way.
I think it's important though.
Really curious.
It takes sort of like, I don't know, the gloss off of it a bit to be like, well, anyone can do this.
Right.
There's obviously varying degrees of professionalism, but technically, I think for some people outside of that industry, they just view it as completely untouchable. Not for them, for the special people or whatever.
This sort of magical world where things happen. But seeing having a hand in the behind the scenes and the thrill of playing a finished product, and I mean, to your parents, that was the audience or your friends at the time. That was really exciting, and I just loved that whole process.
And do you find even today that's still like one of the things you love about your job is sort of working on a thing, obviously for a lot longer, I assume, but like, you know, getting close to that finished product, or the various finished product steps you have along the way, and sort of do you still kind of get that feeling?
Yes, the finished product is definitely a wonderful thing. It's wonderful to share with your friends and family and a wider audience. I think more and more I'm coming to enjoy the process a lot more, and find the journey of that whole process really important to enjoy, because the more I get into this industry, I'm finding that you learn most shows don't finish.
Yes.
Most shows don't have a final product.
Right.
in terms of that's just the stats of all the shows you try to make.
Yeah.
Most don't happen. So you have to keep that in mind and still enjoy the process regardless.
Yeah. Still be proud of the work along the way and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And we work with such great people and we have such a great time doing it. And that is really important, I think. If you're in this purely for the final product, I think it would just get a bit too hard and demoralizing, because there's a lot of things that just, projects that just fall over, for not necessarily for the creative reasons, but
it can just happen. Yeah, there's like, even in obviously I teach at RMIT screenwriting, and the second semester subject I teach is write an episode of television. And one of the classes that we start off with, where we basically there's this great video, I can't remember her name, where she's talking about, hey, here's the 7 easy steps to get your TV show made. And it's very tongue-in-cheek, because it's actually like step 1 has like 14 things, and step 2, and she's basically really like, showing just how difficult it is to get a TV show made in a very fun, glib way. And kind of at every point, she's like, but it might all fall over at this point too. Totally. But let's say you get past that and then you get to the next thing. Oh, and then it might fall over again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, there's a new executive and they don't actually like it anymore. So
absolutely. There are so many hurdles to pass. And I'm getting better at celebrating those small hurdles when you do pass
I think you have to, obviously.
Because you might not ever get to the end. And like you said, you've done great work to that point.
For sure,
It's not for nothing. And you never know where that work might go. A show might fall over, but it might open another door, or a character in that show might inspire another show, for example.
Yes, which definitely happens.
That does happen.
Yeah. And even like, I don't know, no work is wasted. And I think this is true for any creative work, in that, well, one, you've learned something. So straight away there's value there.
Exactly.
But also, like you say, you might take a character, use it elsewhere, or 5 years from now, someone might be like, oh, we're kind of looking for this kind of a thing. You're like, oh, actually, we've got something.
That's it. Yeah. The show's not gone. It's not like off your slate. We shelve a lot of shows, which exactly 5 years down the track may be relevant again. Or that's very true.
So let's get into the producing side of things.
Yes.
So I guess let's answer our original question. So what does a producer do? What is your rambling half-hour answer?
Oh, gosh. Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
Oh, boy. Okay, good question. I guess if I could sum it up in a short sentence.
Beautiful.
Because I try to have this quick, snappy answer when I'm at an event or something and people ask. No, I'm not going to be able to think of a short sentence, but it's making it happen, I suppose, in a very broad sense. The producer is generally on board the project the longest out of everyone, from the very inception of the idea all the way to a decade down the track, paying residuals to cast.
Right. Still,
once it's been shown on TV for, 3 rounds or repeats, and everything in between. So the producer is on board from either like within a company of the project being created in-house, or you're optioning a project or working with an external writer, and then just making it happen, hiring people, financing, pitching, organizing scripting, writers' rooms, and then on to production and hiring crew and scheduling and budgeting and overseeing the production into post and editing, and I suppose general project management kind of role. And wrapped up in that is a lot of leadership kind of roles and managing teams and managing creatives, which can be a interesting challenge sometimes. Especially early on, getting the right teams together.
Right.
Even so early on in writers' rooms, getting a writing team that really click.
Yeah,
and
real cohesive.
Yeah. And dealing with networks and broadcasters and making sure all the parties are happy. So, yes, quite varied. And then after it's made, getting it to market and selling it internationally in different territories.
Which already, like, it's so clear why it's hard to
really,
describe. Like, what do you do? Well, there's not just, you don't have one job to do. You've got thousands, literally thousands of jobs across the course of a TV show going to air. And then, like you say, afterwards as well. Where, like, for me as the writer, I'm like, great, job done.
It's a one-word answer almost. Yes. And And I think what can complicate it is different producers do take on kind of different roles. There are producers who are a lot more creative, or there are producers who just kind of handle financy side a bit more. So it can vary a little. And that's, you do sometimes see credits and there might be a number of producers.
Yeah, I think this is where some of the confusion comes from.
And then executive producers and associate producers and line producers. And there's a lot of different types.
Yes, which I won't make you explain every single one. That's fine. But yeah, like I guess to sum it up is like a producer is very much in charge of organizing an aspect or many aspects of the production and distribution of a TV show. Sort of maybe an easy way to say it. Which kind of brings me to a point that I actually kind of got weirdly excited about to talk to you with, which is like the organization of story. Stories actually require a shit ton of just organizing stuff. Whether it's TV or even I think even for a writer needs to be organized. Obviously, like there's the sort of idyllic version of like this writer who wakes up at 2 p.m, has a bowl of bourbon by the side of the bed, and just, the muse hits and they're off and writing, where at least from my experience, that's definitely not the case. You've got deadlines, you've got, various things you need to hit. And the more organized you are, the better you're going to be as a storyteller, ultimately. But definitely for the world of TV that you live in, it would die without good organization. Literally. Like I can't imagine the various sort of like, I kind of picture you as the spider at the center of the web, like there's so many different things going on. Arguably the spider at the center of many webs. Really, it's not just the singular.
Yeah, and I think when you are in a production company, we do have a lot of projects going on, so there is a lot to manage over different webs.
So on the organizational side of things, that's clearly a strength of yours, would you say?
Yes. Yes, I think anyone who knows me will attest to my organizational skills. And I think, more importantly, I really enjoy it. And, back to what I was saying earlier, when I was producing the little videos we would make as kids, I think I've always been into organizing and enjoyed it. And I think that's a big part of being able to produce, is organizing that side of things. And,
for sure.
I know not everyone loves it. And I think that's what I love about the people I work with. We each look at the other person and what they do and think, oh God, I would hate to be doing that. But we each love what we do.
That shows how you're in the right role when that's the situation.
So yes, sorry, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. So basically, you've been literally organized since you were a wee bub. Organizing your friends to make these things, which I kind of love. I think that's, and I think, why would you be in this job if you didn't love that side of it?
For sure.
And I actually think I'm maybe a little bit different from some writers, where I also like being organized. I love it. I've sort of trialed a number of different to-do lists, and like if I hear about a new one, I definitely want to get my fingers into it.
Wonderful. I feel like that's a whole other podcast chat we have to have.
We should, and we will, for sure. Like, I could talk about trolley boards all day long.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. My partner Jordan will sometimes start to talk about his, to-do list or how he organizes things, and I'm like, get very excited. And, let's get chatting.
Stop talking dirty over here. Yeah,
exactly.
So then, what are the sides of sort of being a producer that you felt you weren't just your natural skill set, that you sort of had to really develop, or what are those sorts of areas?
Yeah, I think perhaps the networking sort of pitching side is a very necessary side. And while I don't mind it, and it's not even, not that it's a strong skill set, it's just I don't love it, and it feels like a bit more of a chore and something that I have to do, and sort of the harder part of it for me, and doesn't come perhaps quite so naturally. Being a introvert, I would say the whole networking side is quite tiring, and
for sure,
going to markets, not that we've done that since the pandemic, but those are quite exhausting and drainers, a lot of work, but very worthwhile and necessary part of the job.
Do you have any I'm guessing, I think film and TV is such an interesting one in terms of introverts and extroverts, because I think it actually draws both for very different reasons. True. So I would very much class myself as an introvert as well, and kind of feel the same way. The pitching side of being a writer is, And I've got some mates they're more extroverted, and one in particular who will I'll be sort of saying, oh yeah, I've got this idea, it's kind of like this, and then he'll pitch it back at me better than what I'm like, yes, oh my God, can you just come pitch for me?
Yeah, totally.
So sort of, is there any sort of side of it that any sort of tips or tricks or just anything that sort of helped you along the way?
Yeah, I think it just comes back to the project and really believing in the project. I think it's really hard to pitch a project if you don't love it yourself and if you don't really believe that it can go somewhere.
Yeah.
I think even when we were starting out super early on at Pirate Size, we would be pitching these projects and we were so green and new on the scene and kind of like nobodies at these markets, but we really believed in these projects. And I think that passion did show through, and I think we sounded a lot more experienced and bigger than we were. And people were really willing to listen and take it further with us, because I think we just really believed in the projects, and we had grand goals and visions of where it could go.
Yeah.
Perhaps this sort of, you don't want to oversell yourself, but having this confidence of where you can go and big dreams, I think. I know that all sounds a bit wishy-washy, but...
No, I think that's it, though. Yeah. I think if you, especially again, for an introvert coming into this industry, that's such a daunting phase of it. And again, for the subject I teach, we purposely, one of the assessments is based around them pitching an episode idea. Sure. And a lot of them don't like doing it. A lot of students don't like doing it, or they're just, not great to begin with, because they've never really had to do it before, even if they've been writing for years or whatever. But it's like you say, it's such a necessary one. But I do think, by basically, I actually really love the advice of, believe in the project. If you're passionate about it, well, just basically let that passion show. Like, don't try to sort of go, well, it's kind of be all intellectual about it. Like, the more excited you can get for your project, the more excited other people will be.
And I think being, this word is thrown around a lot, but authentic and not doing a pitch like you think it should be done. I feel like that, you might go on and YouTube and look at videos of how to pitch.
Yeah, there's so much advice out there.
And follow this thing of what you think it's meant to look like. Whereas if you just go in and have a conversation and talk like yourself as a normal person, which can be hard to do.
Right, sure. But it is something you do most days, so hopefully you can bring it to the table that time.
And those early pitching sessions are really daunting, especially if you're with a big network or a big
just
executive.
Like the power dynamic feels so different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can feel strange to go in and just talk normally like yourself. But I would say that's what people love. They love to see authentic creators with unique stories that they believe in. I think the other great advice or tips we've had has actually come from pitching in a US market. Weirdly enough, I think it's a very Australian thing to not talk yourself down, but not really talk yourself up.
Definitely.
We've early on we would be in a few pitches at, say, Kids Screen in the States, and the Americans are very positive and optimistic. Great pitches, and we would be pitching, and they would almost not quite ask this outright, but you got the sense that they were like, why are you talking down your show so much? Because, as an Australian, you're like, you pitch this idea, and it's like, oh, it's not quite finished, or it needs a bit more work.
Yeah.
But you pitch
all these sorts of caveats around,
and they're just like, just sell us the show. What do you love about this show?
Right.
So we got better at leaving aside those caveats and just really pitching the positives, and we can deal with the stuff that needs working on later. Pitch what you see is great about the show. And don't worry about those negative aspects just yet.
Right. Like, why it's such a funny thing, because it is such, like you say, part of our culture. I would say part of British culture. I was even listening to a podcast where it was like two British TV writers, and they were talking about the same thing, working with Americans.
Right.
Where they might be like, oh yeah, like I can do it. I'm sure there's about 1 million people that are better than me, but whatever. And then like, oh, there's someone better? Okay, I'll go get them. Like they're really like, I'll take you at face value sort of thing. And obviously, the TV industry has become very much a global industry. So in Australia, you can get away with that stuff because we can read through the lines and go, oh, okay, you're just doing the tall poppy thing. Good for you. If anything, we expect it.
Yeah, we do.
You come in with arrogance and like, this is the best thing. You guys are going to be wowed by it. We're going to be like, all right, catcha. You know, where obviously in the States that's less wanted. They just want you to give them the good stuff.
Totally. They want you to sell it. They want that pitch, which is a good lesson. And like you say, it's finding that balance. You don't want to bring arrogance into the meeting, but sell
but I think like the idea of passion over arrogance, like,
for sure.
Yes, you're getting exuberant about it, but of course you should. Like,
absolutely.
You guys been chipping away at it, and well, since we're sort of on the topic of the global market, so I know that obviously you guys have worked a lot with various countries. How do you find that part of it? How's that been on your journey?
Yeah, really great. It's been really interesting working with different countries and, you know, like we were alluding to, the different cultural aspects. We have a co-production at the moment with a company in the UK and one in the States, and sort of those differences are interesting. But it's been really great. It's been interesting during the pandemic. How it's almost made that process easier in a way.
Right, it's equalised the playing field.
Yeah,
just like, even if you're having a writer's room in anywhere, it's going to be over Zoom. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's sort of, I think people are a lot more willing as well to, so we already had those co-productions in place going into it, but going into new pitchings and with networks, they seem to be a lot more willing to take a Zoom pitch than in the past, because they're more comfortable, and I suppose everyone has realised just what you can do.
Where like just a few years ago, they would have been like, great, come to our office. And you're like, your office is a 20-hour flight away from me.
Which, and we would make the trip every so often and combine all our pitches into one. But it is a lot easier now. As you say, it's leveled the playing field. And you just, access to a lot more creatives. The industry here is very small and it's great, but there's only so far you can go, I suppose.
For sure.
So we have, diversified out into other countries.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. And then obviously you've also got to be willing to have meetings quite late at night. Thanks for the time difference.
Yes, all times of day. It's all these really different time zones.
But hey, that's someone who loves organising.
That's true. It's true. Yeah, all those different time zones. That's a good task to organise for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's jump just quickly back to sort of the idea when you went to VCA and you did this. Yeah. So I guess what's my question? I think I'm trying to think for like people who might be listening to this and thinking, oh, geez, that's sounding like me. Maybe I want to be a producer, right? So like, how did you find the idea of what you thought a producer was going into that course, and then sort of, I guess, learning about it and then now doing it? Like, what's your view? How's it changed? What do you think of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think the course at VCA was great. There was a little bit of theory. A lot of what I did there, I think it's changed slightly since I was there, but a lot of what I did was you team up with a director from the directing stream and make a little short film together. I think at that level, looking back, really what I was doing more production management, which I'm sure a lot of people are like, what's that mean? What's the difference? Anyway, it's not as big in scope as producing, I suppose, because they are short films and quite contained in a way. But it was a good learning curve just in terms of how to actually make a film and organise people and get teams together and hire people. And I think, so from there I went into full-time work at Werner Film Productions and got to watch Jo Werner, who I mentioned earlier, produce shows like Dance Academy and she's gone on to do some huge shows, and that was an amazing learning experience. And I think over the years I just soaked it all up as that kind of learning where in the day you don't necessarily end the day and think, oh, I learned this and this, but looking back over 5 years, I look back to the start and even at VCA, you know, when you think you're such a big hotshot short film producer, and I think, oh God, I literally knew nothing. And I'm sure I'll think that about myself now, but that's the beauty of it. So that was great. And then I think, though, the biggest learning curve for me in terms of producing has been starting Pirate Size Productions, this company, and just doing it. You're very much thrown in the deep end, and I still mostly feel like a fraud. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
Which I think is a very common feeling.
The classic imposter syndrome.
Classic.
Like, this is the thing with especially any kind of person in the creative industries. I feel like we're all wearing it. It's just hidden behind our mask.
Totally. Yeah. I think I get away with it most of the time. Yeah. But I've learned a lot. I think in terms of what I used to think of it as now, I went into it knowing the whole aspect of it's about organizing and project managing and it is all that still. And I think have learned more and more that it is so much about people and getting the right people together and relationships.
Yep.
And, I was talking about networking before. Networking in a really long-term sense. A lot of the best opportunities we've had have come from relationships that have been built over years, not just like a one-off networking event.
Yeah. Where you like cornered somebody. Yeah, you've got this great idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's more this relationship which you're keeping going because you like them, but also it could be an opportunity at some point, not now, and then a few years down the track, they think of you for something, or there's this opening, or it's easy to get a meeting because you know this person. Yeah. It's long-term relationships. Yeah, a huge part of my job is just managing people, I think.
Yeah, I love that because I don't think that even I had sort of thought about it in that context, but obviously like you and I know each other because we've done some work together and of course that's how we know each other.
Yeah,
you've been very personable and we've gotten along and all the rest. But of course you're doing that daily with so many different groups of people like we kind of talked about, all those different spider webs you're managing.
Right. And sort of, I think at the start of all this, I thought, I thought there must be an immediate end goal in a relationship with someone, whereas now I'm realizing and much more open to just relationships for the sake of good relationships, knowing that it might not be today or tomorrow that it necessarily leads to anything. It could be years down the track or not, and it's just a nice relationship. Yeah,
exactly. And I that's definitely a lesson I've learned as well. Like, the idea of networking is, again, for an introvert, a nightmare. You're like, I've got to put on a song and dance show. And it's just, and again, I think this is a real area where a lot of people have the wrong idea, where you've explained it perfectly. It's literally just being yourself.
Yeah.
Not looking to, like you said, tick a box, achieve something, get something. Like, that's obviously if someone's can sense that from you, they're going to be repulsed by it a little bit because, okay, you're trying to get something from me. Like,
and everyone can tell.
Yeah, exactly right. And like, I've definitely been at some events where you can see people like literally work in the room as if you're like, oh my gosh, it's painful to watch. Where for me, definitely that's what I've learned with networking is like, just talk to them like a person. I can do that, And it's like...
It's quite simple when you say it like that.
Exactly.
But,
and again, I think it's even like that authenticity you talked about earlier for pitching. I think it's the same for networking, where it's like, ideally not going to work with someone who's not a good fit for you anyway. If they want to make, a teen romantic drama and you're more into sci-fi. Like,
for sure, yeah.
Well... there's probably some crossover somewhere, but most of the projects you guys are going to be interested in, actually. So like, trying to force yourself to fit their ideal of a great show is kind of foolish.
Yeah. And even on a just relatable sense, projects are so long term, the projects where we do that you just really want to get along as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's really important to just be yourself, because if you are being someone else or putting on this, big dancing,
playing a part, playing the producer.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, that's very hard to continue over years and years. And you really want to build relationships that you're happy to continue for years, and where you can have trust and confidence in the other party. And being yourself is important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there again, with my students and whatnot, so many of them think about networking as that other version.
Sure.
And I definitely try to preach to them, no, please don't ever do that. Yeah. We actually touched on something else that I think is interesting for your role, which is the length of time these projects take. Like, I think most people aren't aware how long it takes to get a TV. Like you said, first of all, it might never get to air.
Right.
But if it does, it's taken years of behind the scenes from people just like you. So like, how have you found that sort of side of it with like sort of again, it sort of really brings into the juggling thing, because that usually means, well, because it does take so long, you've got a few different projects in the works.
Yeah, for sure.
How have you sort of found that side of the work?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that I've learned, that it does take... I knew going into it that projects take a long time. Right. It's nothing like just waiting for it to really get home.
I think, like, again, I mean, I don't know about other project... Like, I like the idea of thinking of it in terms of a project manager. I think that's a really nice connection to draw. But usually for I've got my brother-in-law as a project manager, and for him it seems like, well, there's always sort of the next step we can be working towards, or there's this side of it that we can be doing, where, like you kind of just said, occasionally it's, no, we're waiting.
Sometimes it's just a lot of waiting. And I think maybe the first year or two of the company, we were a little impatient because we didn't want to wait, and we were just so eager and enthusiastic. And there was a particular project where we were just super pumped for it to be out there, and we had made certain progress, but we were just waiting, and it was and we had a really explicit chat about resetting expectations and getting comfortable with the fact that that's a part of the process, and that's okay, and that's part of the journey. Sure. And so, like you said, what is necessary is having quite a number of projects on our slate in varying degrees of development and production. And, the ideal is to, we're not quite there yet, but to essentially be in constant production. So you have one project in production, or a number, how big you want to be. You have some projects in development, some in post. So there's this sort of continual cycle, so you're never essentially just waiting, twiddling your thumbs. There's always a project to be really pushing and active on, and then perhaps at the moment, we've got a few smaller projects on the side that move a lot more quickly, which is nice and satisfying in its own way. A few months and it's kind of turned around. It's quite amazing.
It is.
So it's been a good learning curve, and comes back to that, what I was saying at the start, of just getting comfortable with the process and enjoying every stage if you can.
Well, then another sort of side of it, which I guess kind of ties into that, is like, obviously once you do have a few projects, they're all varying stages. Like we've talked about, there's so much a producer does in terms of getting a story all the way across to screen. Like, does it ever daunt you that your to-do list is arguably endless? Like there's like always, well, I could always go off and do X, Y, Z.
It is endless, and there is always more you could be doing. And I imagine for a lot of people, running your own business, maybe in any sense, and being a creative in any sense, I'm sure for you as a writer, you have to be good at knowing when to stop.
For sure.
Even just, at the end of the day, knowing when to stop, or on weekends, you have to make those choices. I mean, I often work a bit on the weekends, but I've sort of made that active choice at the moment. And
it must be a bit different when it's your business.
It is. I would not want to work on the weekends for someone else. I'm happy at the moment to be doing that because it's my business and I care very deeply. But like you say, the list is endless. And I think a big part of managing that is prioritizing. And what do you really want to be doing now? What do you really need to be pushing? Is there stuff with certain deadlines? Are people waiting on us? We spend a lot of time waiting on people.
Right.
We don't ever want to be, we don't ever want people waiting on us, so that we're not stopping that process.
Yeah, nice one. And I agree. I think, for the writing side, well, of course, you could always start writing something else.
Right.
Even if you finish the other thing.
It's never ending.
And definitely, I think, again, creative industries across the board is always like, well, there's more I could be doing.
There's always more.
Yeah. And especially early days where all the work is, arguably going somewhat unpaid.
For sure.
And then you're like, well, I could do it, but I'm not getting paid to do it either. Yeah. Cool. All right, well, let's jump back to story just to sort of finish this off. So... obviously, you started in Werner with these kids shows, and now Pirate Size mostly works in kids TV. What sort of is it about kids TV that you enjoy working in?
I love the audience. I think they're a lot smarter than a lot of people think.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I love the feedback you can get from a young audience, and they really get stuff. You don't have to be super obvious with kids. Like, they're smart. They get the subtle stuff. Granted that different, preschool audience will, get a little bit less. But I love the audience. I love just how impactful kids TV can be. And, we all had those shows growing up that stick with us and had a big impact, and it can shape the kids' views of the world and what they see as normal or what is acceptable. And so I think it can be really powerful. And then it's just really fun. You get to do a lot of fun stuff with kids.
Silly.
You get to be silly. You know, the amount of comments or the amount of feedback notes I've given about farts or, you know, we need more fart jokes in this area.
Yeah.
It's very fun, and I like that part of the industry. It seems there's just a lot of lovely people, and, you know, I think within the broader industry there is too, but I think when you're getting together to create really fun projects, a certain amount of fun just comes with that.
It's just natural. Exactly right. I agree. It just sort of bleeds into it because we're all here to make something fun. So of course, totally. And even sometimes in writers' room, sometimes like the room of people all having a chat about a particular topic, whether it's a fart, whether it's like how high can they jump? Can they jump out of that tree or whatever it might be? And you just sort of sometimes you get that moment of like, this is crazy, which is like these professional people are all having this chat and like getting into it as well.
And very seriously as well. How serious can we get about farts? There was what type of, I think it was a unicorn fart. I don't know. There was a number of emails going back and forth of just like nailing the sound of this specific fart. Silly stuff like that you do get quite serious about because this stuff, you know, matters to get it right. And but it's a lot of fun. And
I agree. And I think even like you're saying, it really does have an impact. Where, you know, there are people today, myself included, who still remember, like, happily will talk about the kid shows they loved as a kid.
Right. Yeah.
Still watch kid shows today. We've literally got Adventure Time mugs in front of us. And because I think, that's the other thing about kid shows is that, well, yes, there's a primary audience. There's a fairly big secondary audience, depending on what kind of show you're making. But I think, again, the ones that are fun to make for adults, even if they're a bit silly and childish, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you don't like silly and childish.
And I think the very recent great example is Bluey, which I'm sure everyone has heard of by now. But parents just love that show.
Adore it.
And I think parents are learning just as much as kids are from that
Couldn't
show.
Agree more.
And it's really been interesting to see. And, you know, we talk to networks now and everyone's talking about that secondary audience and how important it is to cater to that audience because, it has a big impact for them as well.
Yeah, and again, like obviously for us who are that audience, so it just means it's even, if we're not going, all right, let's just really dumb this down, let's make it two-dimensional, let's make no subtext, you know, obviously that's boring to make. And like you say, not even the kids. They are so much more switched on. Like I teach kids as well, and sometimes the stuff they know, you're like, oh wow, I didn't think you were that clued into the world. Also kind of scary that you're that clued into the world. Totally. All right. My last question for you then is, what sort of stories are you drawn to? Like what story kind of really gets you like, oh yeah, I want to be involved with this?
Good question. I think I love stories with a mix of whimsy and fun, but real heart and almost not sadness, but something with a real sort of challenge to it, or an emotional challenge. That if you didn't have the light and the fun to it, could be a bit heavy on its own. But I think you can have a lot of fun with kids TV and that sort of mix. I mean, with any audience really, but mixing that sort of that strange and that beautiful at the same time. And I think the projects that I love on our slate the most have that really nice mix.
I agree. I think most of the shows I have to agree 100% to be honest, because most of the shows I'm drawn to, they've got silly funny, like sometimes just the dumbest thing, but you're like, that's great, I'm so happy they put that in there. And then it can easily turn on a dime to be quite serious.
For sure.
And I think the two inform each other. Like the seriousness is made more serious by the fact we just saw something funny. The funnier is made funny by the fact that serious stuff was like, again, it is just real life. But obviously you can be like at a funeral and someone does something funny and it's still funny.
It is. And like you say, it's almost funnier because you are at a funeral.
Yeah. I remember like I was raised very Catholic and not so much these days. But Jono and I, my twin brother and I, would have to get separated regularly whenever we went to church. Mostly just for just looking at each other and breaking into fits of giggles. Like, not even pulling a face. It would just be the thing where you're like, oh, I think he's looking at me. And it was just hilarious.
And it's all about the context of where you are that makes that so funny. Yes. If you were just at home or if you were at a park and you did that, it wouldn't be so funny.
No, but you know this is meant to be serious.
Exactly.
And so, And I agree. I think it's actually harder to achieve in a show than it seems. It feels like, oh, that should be pretty organic, but actually maybe not. But the shows that really do it, or the stories that have it almost inbuilt in there, you can kind of play in both realms. Absolutely. I agree. I think they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Bri, this has been truly illuminating and awesome.
It's been a joy, as always, Damian.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right. Well, if people want to check you out, check out what you've been up to, where should they go?
Check out Pirate Size Productions. We are on social media, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, I believe.
Yep.
The wonderful Alyssa runs all of that. She is terrific.
Yeah.
And we've got some really exciting projects in the work, which I can't say too much about at this point, but they are progressing well and should hopefully be on screen within some years.
Hard to say. Yeah, it's so hard. Like as we said, it takes ages.
It takes a long time.
But definitely, hopefully some good big stuff coming from Pirate Size. So definitely keep an eye on them. Brilliant. Well, thanks so much. And as for me, you can find me on Twitter at middaypajamas, or feel free to send me an email at shorttales.podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, this has been Short Tales, and I've been Damian Robb.